Right. This is interesting. I know we say that about every other episode that we do, but this one is indeed interesting. Hear me out. Two players played a game. One of them, an all-time great of the sport, a 5-time world champion, lost, and then, not too later, pulled out of the tournament for the first time in his career. Announcing the same on Twitter using the famous football manager Jose Mourinho's meme video, I prefer not to speak really. If I speak, big trouble. That is the lamest Jose Mourinho impersonation, but yeah, that's where we are right now. And on began the speculations, too many of them. The two played again a few days later in another tournament online, and the 5-time world champion logged off after one move. While the other cast of the story said that he's willing to play naked to prove his innocence. When did chess become ever so complex? Hello and welcome to the Express Sports Pod. This is Game Time, and today we are going to bring you the hot story in the sporting world featuring Magnus Carlsen, Hans Niemann, and of course, chess. I think you know what we're talking about, but even if you don't, just hang around till the end. My co-host Mihir Vasavda and I, Rahul Pandey, will try to bring you this in the best and most detailed ways possible. Speaking of which, hello Mihir, how are you doing? And just before we dive into this, what are your first thoughts about this story and just what makes it so different than every other thing that we could have talked about right now?
It just gives a range of thoughts. It is exceptional. This kind of entertainment is what perhaps chess needed. Now, I seriously don't want the traditionalists to jump on me because, well, I think all traditionalists in chess are actually enjoying the story and they're trying to kind of make the most of it for themselves, for their brands, but also for the sport. हमने यार मतलब काफी टाइम से we've been wanting to do a very nice chess podcast. I think our producer Yashank, he will agree. We have tried so many different avenues. We've done a few as well, especially involving Indian prodigies and Indian players. But this is a kind of story that has everything in it. It has really high quality chess when we look at it from that angle. There is deception, there is proper rivalry, and there are some crazy claims being made from all sides. So yeah, this Hans Niemann versus Magnus Carlsen saga, it hasn't just taken over the chess world, but I think it's been one of the top sports stories over the past 1 month.
Absolutely. And it does have that almost too appealing narrative when we talk about rivalries in sports, the old versus new narrative, because everyone, not even those, we're not just talking about those who follow chess on a regular basis, but probably everyone who has heard the word sport at least once in their life knows who Magnus Carlsen is. But on the other hand, there's this other cast member of this story who is, of course, not yet as established a player as Magnus Carlsen. And we need to talk about him to get a better idea of the story as well, right? So let's start with him. Who is Hans Niemann? How does his story in chess come about so far? And what's been different about his career building into, of course, this rivalry that has been born over the last couple of weeks against one of the all-time greats in chess history?
So Hans Niemann, like you mentioned, I don't think many outside the chess world, and that too I'm talking about a very hardcore chess world, would have known about him. He has been this very nondescript name before all the ruckus began. And I think one of the reasons for that, after scoring through a lot of reputed chess websites, stories, one thing you realize is his rise has been very unprecedented. When you talk about the usual prodigies in chess world, someone like, say, Hikaru Nakamura, who of course will be mentioned time and again during the course of this podcast. Someone like Nakamura, for example, he climbed up the chess circuit gradually over a period of many years. But it wasn't the case with Hans Niemann. Now, he's this 19-year-old quote-unquote prodigy whose rise has been very meteoric. I mean, his FIDE rankings, rating points, which determines your standing in world chess, over the last 3 years, in September 2020, September 2021, and September 2022, has grown manyfold. It has grown by more than 200 points. which chess experts say is quite unprecedented. Now, there's only one other player from the current generation who has done that, and it is Levin Aronian. He is an Armenian player. His rise was something similar, but then there are other aspects to Hans Niemann, which I think we will be delving deep into in the following discussions. But this is broadly what made Hans Niemann a very इंटरेस्टिंग कैरेक्टर ही वाज दिस अगर जो हम उसके इंटरव्यूज देखें अगर जो हम उसके फोटोज देखें तो ही कम्स अक्रॉस एज अ वेरी unusual character. His behavior, the way he talks, his body language is all very unlike a routine chess player. Perhaps that's what also adds to the intrigue. And then there's also his rise, which has caught the attention of many people. Now, what happened, just to add a little more background to this story, is that here you have this guy who has emerged virtually out of nowhere. He goes and competes in this tournament called the Sinkfield Cup. Now, Sinkfield is one of the most reputed tournaments on the chess circuit. It's not the biggest, but one of the biggest. And he goes there, he starts taking out some of the most established names. And one of them was Magnus Carlsen. He defeated Carlsen, and that's when, to use the word, shit hit the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, he beats Magnus Carlsen, and it's an upset. It's a big one. And that's, I think, part of the reason why there's so much talk about the result and everything that's followed after that. Because you mentioned Levin Aronian, and he was one of the very few people who actually backed Niemann after the result, said that it often happens when young players play well, there are always accusations towards them, and that's what has happened here. Of course, we don't know, there have been no investigations about the word cheating in that particular meeting of Carlsen and Niemann in round 3 of the Sinkfield Cup. But it was a big result. Before that, Carlsen had won, 53 games, I think, in a row, and he ended that streak, which is also a biggie, apart from the fact that you've just beaten Magnus Carlsen. So that happens, and everything goes haywire, or in better words that you just described it, shit hit the fan. And a lot of people, even though Magnus Carlsen, what he did after that was, I think, pretty incredible, went on to Twitter and just pulled out of the tournament and used that Jose Mourinho video, which we mentioned in our intro. And after that, all the accusations just sort of started coming in. Let's talk a bit about that. Who were the players who were accusing Niemann of cheating at that particular point when Carlsen pulled out of the tournament?
Carlsen himself doesn't really mention the C word. He doesn't really explicitly say that Hans Niemann cheated, but he does everything to suggest that he did. Now, while Carlsen did not say it, there were others, like you said, they did. One of them was, of course, Hikaru Nakamura, who was doing his live stream of the match. And in the following days, Nakamura, it goes from being slightly on the fence on the issue to being really forthright on it. He becomes one of the biggest names to claim that, and also not just to suggest that Niemann would have cheated, but also to bring up his dubious past. Now, what is this past we are talking about? It's not the case where just because Hans Niemann defeated Magnus Carlsen, everyone said he's cheating. The issue goes a lot more behind that. So, one of the things that Nakamura brings up during his live stream, and which picked up by everyone who follows chess and even otherwise, is that Niemann was banned by chess.com for cheating. Chess.com, of course, is one of the biggest platforms. And I mean, to be banned by them was seen as a big deal. It was a big blot on Niemann's career. Remember, he's still a very young kid when this happened. But well, it did. So that was one flag. And then there were other experts who then pointed out that Niemann doesn't really analyze the games, the manner in which players of his stature, players with his FIDE ratings generally do. Now, what they mean by that is that he, time and again, goes into moves and suggestions during the moves which do not make complete sense, and he is still able to pull off those moves and go to a safe position during a match. And thus it implies that his rating could be a little fraudulent and it isn't representative of his true strength. That is the second thing. So basically they started questioning his board play, and then there was this other GM, Eric Hansen of Canada, went on to claim that he had removed Niemann from a fight chess event due to cheating suspicions. I mean, these are all allegations, but they have a pattern to it. And it brings Niemann into this very uncomfortable zone for him.
Yeah, I think, one of the points that have come to my mind while we've been talking about this from the very beginning is that this story in somewhat ways represents the transformation of the sport itself over the years. We've been talking about players who accuse Niemann on their Twitch streams, on YouTube interviews, talked about a tournament that was over the board chess tournament. Then there was an online competition, which we are going to talk about, the rematch that took place between Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann after that. So yeah, it's a story that has highlighted how the sport has come along over the years. And this is not the first time that accusations of cheating or the word cheating has trended alongside the term chess, the sport chess. Before tournaments came up with stringent rules to counter cheating in over-the-board chess competitions, an effective method of cheating was considered to hide a device on one person. Now, whether it was hiding chess engines in virtues or other apparel, it was done. One of the easiest methods in, I should say, the earlier days, because it doesn't quite seem possible now, but who's to say was the future holding for us, was to have visible assistance from someone in the crowd. So players playing, and whether a coach or someone from the family or friend sitting in the crowd can give them non-verbal cues. That used to happen as well. A very creative way of cheating was used by former mayor of the northern town of, I hope I'm pronouncing this really correctly, Bucinasco, near Milan in Italy, where Loris Serida was banned for allegedly using dark glasses that had been fitted with a micro camera at 3 tournament games. Now, the glasses that he was wearing sent live images of his opponent's moves to a powerful chess software program that then dictated through a secret earpiece that he had with him the correct move, the correct counter move that he should make. And while we are talking about ways to cheat, this one is funny, but it's been a serious problem for organizers. Players using bathroom breaks in between moves. Now, while they are not banned as such and they cannot be limited as well, there have been instances of players receiving assistance while on these breaks. And in over-the-board games, cheating has occurred in different ways. But now online games have taken their place in the sports calendar, and to ensure that cheating doesn't happen in online games, which it does. The most common way of cheating while playing online is using a chess engine. Programs which power chess engines can help a player play accurately and quickly, which is something they need to do in online chess matches because there are cameras. Obviously, the webcams are at all times directed towards the player. Now, that is something the organizing committee has made clear. Whenever 2 players are playing via the online medium, the 2 webcams on the players must be directed towards their faces so as the chief arbiter can really keep an eye on what's happening. But the tournaments have also mandated that webcams, apart from the webcams, there should be additional recording cams at the place where the 2 players are playing in the room, which I just found bizarre because I was in research of this episode and following this entire saga. I saw a couple of matches and it was interesting. It was a proper shooting setup. It was a proper web series shooting setup where a player is just basically playing chess online. Mind you, they're not allowed to have any other additional softwares open on their computer while they're doing this. The webcam was already on them and they had 3 cameras from different angles trying to get a gauge of what's happening in the room and whether the player is not having a mobile phone or an additional electronic device alongside to help them It's ridiculous, basically. Cheating itself happens in the sport, but there are ways that the organizing committees and the authorities are trying to reduce it. So, yeah, I think that's about it when it comes to the different methods of cheating. But let's come back to this story now. Hans, there were a lot of accusations lined up against him. We've already talked about him. But he also had a lot to say when he was asked about Carlsen withdrawing from that match and when he finally addressed the elephant in the room. Would you want to tell what Niemann said at his place, and did it make sense to you what he was trying to address at that particular time?
His personal defense came pretty late. It didn't come immediately after Carlsen's tweets and Nakamura's allegations, followed by everyone else who jumped on that bandwagon. Before Niemann spoke out, it was his coach, Jacob Agard, who actually came out in his support, a very staunch defense of Niemann. Basically, he just said it was all paranoia and insanity. And then he went on to justify and explain why he rated Niemann as, although a very difficult player to train, but a very talented at that. Now, that was his coach, of course, saying it. Niemann was then asked about everything that was happening. And also, it's important to remember that while all this is happening, Niemann is still playing competitions, still playing matches. And wherever he's going, there is really extra scrutiny on it, not just among the commentators and those who follow the sport, but there was this crazy video where he is entering the competition venue and just the security is checking him. It's almost like, you are a suspect entering airport terminal. It was that level of checking. Each and every item of his was removed and checked. And that was something that he had to go through. And soon after, in one of the interviews that he gave, he spoke about some of these issues head on. So he admitted to cheating. He admitted to cheating twice, in fact, in his career as a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old boy. He basically said that that was a mistake. He was embarrassed about it. And he was a changed man and he doesn't cheat anymore, especially. And that's the reason he focuses a lot on the board games. So that was one issue he addressed. There were also allegations made by Nakamura on his accent, something it sounds bizarre, but Nakamura basically went on to ask for Hans Niemann claims to be an American. Why doesn't he have that typical American accent when he speaks? And Niemann also addressed that. He basically said that spent a lot of years across Europe playing and living there, where he was surrounded by people who spoke poor English, and that also changed the way he spoke the language. So all the implications that were made to not just target or make Hans Niemann look like he was a habitual cheater, but also someone who had a personality which was very different to others, Niemann addressed all those things. And so much so that he threw out an open challenge saying that if you want, I'll strip naked just to pacify everyone who has doubts, and I'll play like that. Very staunch defense, but it hasn't really convinced many people.
Yeah, it hasn't. Again, coming back to the point, the fact that this was Magnus Carlsen, it's going to be difficult for the person on the other side of the story to prove his point, especially for someone who has already admitted, as you said, to cheating before, that too twice. I heard one of the interviews from Dutch grandmaster Anish Giri the other day. He was asked about the whole saga and his comments on it. And he said that it's difficult, right, to trust someone who has admitted to cheating before, and that to a young player who's trying to make a name for themselves. I think one of the statements that Niemann gave, he said the second time when he cheated, the second instance when he cheated in one of those random and unrated games, it was when he was 16, living alone in New York at the heart of the pandemic. And he was willing to go to any extent to grow his dream. And he said that what I want people to know about this is that I'm deeply, deeply sorry. But it's just like when you've admitted to it before, people might as well use it against you, even if you haven't later on. And so that wasn't where the story ended. A rematch happened between the two, Carlsen and Niemann. There was quite a lot of build-up going into that match. It was almost as if all of the chess community was eyeing, okay, what's going to happen? Because Carlsen had never withdrawn in his career from any tournament. He did after losing that match against Niemann. And here he was going to play against him again. But it didn't go all so simply, did it?
It did not. I think what was it just after the first move that Carlsen reached out to Niemann, shook his hands, and conceded the match. That was quite dramatic. And I think it's also important to mention here that while all these allegations have been made against Niemann, none of them have been really backed by any solid evidence. I think काफी important सा point भी है वो, because there are two people especially who have pointed that out. This chess expert called Ken Regan, he challenged Hikaru Nakamura's theory that Niemann doesn't analyze like a FIDE rated 2700 rated player. And he basically defended Niemann, saying that there have been many occasions where players have made positional mistakes but have made comeback. And Niemann isn't the only one. Nigel Short, again, one of the most reputed and credible voices in world chess, he also has pointed out that when Carlsen lost to Niemann the first time in Sinquefield Cup, it was largely due to his own doing and the opening moves that he made. So nothing that really is rooted in evidence when the allegations against Niemann are made. So it was very anticipated, very highly anticipated, the match between Carlsen and Niemann. This was earlier this week. And like you said, when Carlsen just withdrew after one move, it has just fueled this fire even more rather than settling down everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It has. We're going to leave our listeners with this one piece of audio to the live reaction from the commentators as soon as Carlsen just logged off after that one move. Niemann, of course, sticked around for a couple of seconds before he also logged out. It was pretty dramatic. I think the most dramatic moment on YouTube in this one past week. And so, yeah, just have a listen to this.
The game started and Magnus has logged off. What has happened?
Magnus has resigned.
Magnus has resigned the game against Hans Niemann.
Yes. At least that's what it says in our transmission.
Name one move and resigned.
Yes. It looks that way.
That really was something. And Carlsen, of course, cleared some air around the issue after this particular match. He did say in an interview that, this is quote unquote what he said, I think individual people.
I think individual people will answer the question pretty differently depending on their own experiences. But I mean, regardless of whether it's a massive problem or not, it's I think fairly easy to cheat, and on a general basis, I think that cheaters in the future have to be it should not be taken lightly, neither online or over the board.
So yeah, he has used the C term this time around, and don't think it's going to subside this story any soon. I think this is going to turn into probably one of the biggest stories of the sport. It does have that air about it. But yeah, as of now, this is where we are. While we talk about this controversy between these two players, they have been winning matches. Carlsen, despite of the fact that he did not secure a point against Niemann, had won his other 14 games recently, which just goes to show what kind of player we're talking about. Niemann, on the other hand, you did mention that him beating Carlsen wasn't the only, of course, it was the big feat that he did, but it wasn't the only win he registered. So yeah, I think two big players, and one of them, of course, reputed world champion, and the other one trying to make a name for himself. It's going to be something. And as it develops, we are going to have all the updates for you at theindianexpress.com, as we have for everything that's happening in the realm of sport. It's been fun chatting sport again with you, Mihir. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been fun to bring this episode to you, all our listeners. For everything about sports, stay tuned to the Indian Express and tune in next week so that you can find out what we have in store for you. Thank you.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.